Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining our webinar on the topic of sustainability accounting. I will now switch over to my colleague Willibald Kaltenbrunner, who will make the introductions for today.
Thank you, Ivan. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our sustainability accounting webinar. It's actually the second in a row, and I'm very happy that a lot of people followed our invitation and participated in this webinar. Sustainability accounting in a nutshell is gaining more and more relevance. In terms of method or approach, you could describe sustainability accounting as a method through which a company evaluates its impacts to the environment, but also in impacts to the society. And it goes by far beyond traditional sustainability reporting, because traditional sustainability reporting covers usually typical inputs. And when I'm talking about inputs, I mean natural inputs like water consumed, social inputs like number of employees, but also economic inputs. Traditional sustainability reporting focus also on business activities like operation or manufacturing activities. And traditional sustainability reporting focuses also on outputs like natural outputs, and I mean with natural outputs very much carbon dioxide, NOx and so on, but also social outputs like, for example, number of injuries for people. So therefore, sustainability accounting goes far beyond the traditional sustainability reporting. Whenever we are going or talking about sustainability accounting, it's about the outcomes. It means also the impact, and at the end of the day, the consequence of a company outputs to the society and to the environment. But before we are going into details, I would like to give you some technical and organizational inputs. You can connect to audio via your computer or your phone. Your microphone is by default muted. Important for us is, of course, the question and answer session. So therefore, how can you submit your questions? On the top right part of your screen, you have the webinar controls. And when you click on the orange or reddish arrow, you can expand the webinar controls. And in there, you have the chat interface where you can put then your question. So therefore, later on at the end of our webinar, we will have enough time in order to go into a question and answer session. Before we continue, who are the hosts for today? On one side, it's Ivan Vaspalchiev. He's one of our leading sustainability accounting experts in our organization. On the other side, it's me. My name is Willibald Kaltenbrunner, and I'm managing partner of Denkstatt Group. In order that you can see that it's not a pre-recorded webinar, we would like to show also our faces, and hopefully this works. So this is me. Hello, Willi Kaltenbrunner. I'm based here in Vienna, and Ivan, you see also his face. He's based in Sofia. Okay. So coming back again, I would like to continue with a few words on Denkstatt and who is Denkstatt. Denkstatt has been established more than 25 years ago. We are one of the leading sustainability advisors in Central and Eastern Europe, especially with offices in Austria, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. But we do a lot of work outside of this territory. We have been one of those few companies who have been testing the Natural Capital Protocol as a pilot project in the year 2014 and 2015 with the Coke company. In the meantime, we've gained a lot of experience, especially in the food and beverage industry, in the service sectors, but also in the heavy industry. And in the meantime, we have been also involved in a lot of research projects to further elaborate sustainability accounting. Let's move to the spoilers ahead. So a short explanation what means sustainability accounting and what's the principal idea. As I mentioned already before, it's about costs and benefits of the organization related to the environment and the society. And whenever we are talking about costs and benefits, we need to talk about externalities. And you need to differentiate between negative and positive externalities. Negative externalities are the costs that a company inflicts on the society or the environment for which the company does not directly pay a price, which means, for example, air pollution, which means also water depletion or water pollution. It could be also a reduction of well-being due to injuries within your workforce. And the positive externalities are those benefits that the company creates for the society or the environment for which the company is not directly rewarded in the price of their goods and their services. Which means, once again, it could be improvement of health and well-being of the people which live close to your factories. It could mean also an increase of biodiversity. And sustainability accounting tries to pull together all those kind of externalities in one single matrix, and this one single matrix is a monetary value. And the big question is always, so what? What is the benefit out of this approach? And we would like to categorize the benefits in 3 different categories. First of all, probably by using sustainability accounting, you can integrate sustainability into the long-term strategy of the company, hopefully minimizing the negative external impacts and maximizing the positive external impacts. At the same time, you can integrate external impacts into the decision-making process, which means you orient your company more towards sustainable business. And sustainability accounting definitely helps you also in identifying key negative external impacts, which could lead to regulatory changes, but probably also consequences in terms of financial risk. The key message and one of the key things is definitely also the communication. We believe that with sustainability accounting and especially the results of sustainability accounting, you can communicate easier to executive, to rating agency, to NGOs, to media, and so on and so forth. For me personally, I believe the investors have a very high relevance, because what the investors are doing with sustainability accounting, they assess the influence of your business related to the social and environmental externalities, and they assess at the end of the day growth potential, profitability, but also risks. What did we plan for you for today for this webinar? Actually, there are 4 different things. First of all, we would like to give you an overview about the big picture, nature and society as capitals, and to give you a better understanding what it means. Then we would like to make a deep dive in sustainability accounting, which means going into the methodology, making the invisible visible. Then we would like to give you a short overview about sustainability accounting in action, so some practical example and how you can use at the end of the day this method and this approach. And the last thing is definitely the question and answer session, which means we have reserved something like 20 minutes, 50 minutes, 20 minutes at the end of the webinar, so that you can raise your question and hopefully we can answer all of them. So that's from my side for the start, and I would like to pass now back to Ivan, who is going to show you the big picture. Please, Ivan.
Thank you. So the big picture. Before we start with this idea of nature and society as capitals, perhaps first to talk about what we mean by capital at all traditionally today. And it's the sort of idea you find in big economics textbooks. It's a sort of idea that was invented by people whose faces are on people's money. The basic modern idea is costs and benefits in the financial sense. And this pretty much means the sort of stuff that you find in the profit and loss statement of a company. It's the assets you own, so the factories, the machines, it's the money you make, the money you have in the bank. But it doesn't really capture anywhere the environmental or social costs and benefits, and we know though today that this context is important. Only it's less obvious than the company financials. So the idea of natural and social capital really is to try and take these environmental and social issues and try and make them comparable to economic capital. The idea of nature and society as capitals, here as illustrated by something called the Natural Capital Protocol, which we will tell you about in a second, is that basically the environment and society have value and they impact business. For example, we have the impacts of pollution on health. That's a very obvious example of an externality of a negative impact that the business has on the environment and on society. The impacts on ecosystems as well, from something like an oil spill, for example, the loss of biodiversity, that has impacts in terms of the clean water that you lose. Also, there may be other impacts on the biodiversity locally. Things like pollination, we know, business and sectors like agriculture traditionally depend hugely on. Basically, there will be no crops if there is no pollination. So this has a value. Only it's difficult to see, which is where we come in and we try to make this a bit more visible. Of course, business has some positive impacts on society as well. And these are the wages that business pays and the regional economic development business generates. Because you know the old saying that business is the engine of the economy, and that is really true. Business has local impacts that we cannot just ignore. Of course, business also needs a skilled and healthy workforce. Today, this is becoming more and more relevant. Jobs are becoming more complex, so the skills that people need are becoming larger. So the business depends on the skilled and a healthy workforce in order to generate value. It's as simple as that. But of course, some business is occasionally unfair. For example, workers can be negatively impacted in places where there are poor labor rights, such as forced labor, maybe lack of social security payments, or traditionally low wages. And when I say traditionally low, I mean way less than the average wage, what is usually expected for the same job in a different place. So all of these have a value to business, and they have a value to society, whether it's health costs or whether it's the direct benefits that business gains from people. And we are here to tell you that you can really assess these in line with economic capital. And by doing so, you can start to really see the costs and benefits, not just to do with the company itself, with the profit and loss. The profit and loss statement, you can really expand and see all the other issues that are important to a business, and really start making some evidence-based decision making based on this. Which is where the idea of making the invisible visible comes in. All of these impacts on the environment and society, we know they are important. Investors care about them, people care about them, but if you can't really see them in terms of their financial value, at the end of the day, they will never be as important as the profit and loss statement, purely because you can't see how important they are. You can't really compare like for like. But the idea of sustainability accounting and this idea of natural and social capital is really that you can take all of these impacts, economic, environmental, and social, and you can really put them on one page, measure them in the same units, and really have a comparable picture of the overall value of the company's activities. The good thing is, though, this is not it's not some new concept that requires leaps and bounds in terms of extra work. Actually, it's already based on some well-established global initiatives, of the Global Reporting Initiative, the Carbon Disclosure Project, etc. It's taken up by all sorts of ESG indices, like the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. So actually, a company has, or most companies at least that are good at sustainability, they already have most of the tools that they need in order to do a sustainability accounting assessment. Then it's just a matter of changing the thinking slightly and adding some extra value, some extra knowledge at the end, which is what I'm going to be explaining in a second. But basically, just to kind of give you an idea, in concrete terms, used to be, and when I say used to be, this was 20, 30 years ago, the only thing business cared about was profit, or that's what people say anyway, right? But today we know it's not just about profit, it's about CO2 emissions, it's about air pollution, it's about the value to community, the relationship with suppliers, it's about healthy products, and you measure these things in all sorts of different ways. It's euros, it's kilograms of CO2, something like a healthy product. How do you even measure it? You get this difficulty that you can't really assess trade-offs between these things. You can't really report on them coherently. You can't really make some evidence-based decision-making about the importance of these issues. So really, you're comparing this orange that we have in the bottom left corner with the watermelon. You can't really compare them. So, but what we can do is we can go to sustainability accounting and this idea of natural and social capital. We can apply the global standards out there that are called the Natural and Social and Human Capital Protocol, and we no longer talk about CO2. We talk about climate change impacts. We don't talk about air pollution. We talk about air pollution health costs. We don't talk about value to community as this big uncertain thing. We talk about business generated for local companies. Healthy products, now that's consumer health costs saved. So now everything we can convert into a euro value, and by converting it into a euro value, we can start seeing the trade-offs. We can start seeing the real holistic value that business brings. And the good thing is this is already aligned with all sorts of sustainability reporting initiatives that businesses are already familiar with. So doing the work, going the extra mile is not actually all that much more difficult. But really to kind of put some meat on the bones to really give you an idea of how it works in practice. It's all about this impact pathway concept. So basically it's walking the full distance from business activities all the way from what business does to the environment, how it impacts it, and then what the costs and benefits are to society. On top, we have greenhouse gas emissions are such a traditional example. They cause climate change, we all know that. And the impact is something called the social cost of carbon, which I'll use this as an example in a second. Basically, it's somebody went away and did the math and said, okay, climate change will have this much impact on the economy. So for a ton of CO2, this is how much the impact in financial terms is. With traditional sustainability tools, you don't really go all the way to costs and benefits. Usually it's all about the impact drivers, as we call them. This is your kilograms of CO2 emissions, your kilograms of air quality emissions, maybe, or the amount of suppliers you have in particular supply chains. But you don't really go all the way, and you don't really see why should we care? What are the costs and what are the benefits? With sustainability accounting, we go that extra mile. And to really, really give you an idea of how this works, let's just kind of take CO2 again as an example, just because it's so pervasive. Everybody knows about CO2. To know how much CO2 emissions you have, let's say from your delivery fleet, from trucks in the company. So you need to know what kind of trucks you have. You need to know the Euro standards, the fuel quality standards that they have, and you need to know what sort of fuel that they burn. So this already companies have. If you're reporting at all on any sustainability reporting standard, you already know what your trucks are, and you already know what the CO2 emissions are. Well, there's all sorts of tools like the greenhouse gas protocol, the IPCC tools. They will tell you how much greenhouse gases you have. But then when it comes to impacts, that's where it really gets interesting. And then for this in particular, it's usually people talk about the social cost of carbon. But what does that really mean though? Because social cost of carbon is one thing, but then you have other things like the emission trading schemes, which is the market price of CO2. So what I really want to show you with this picture is, which kind of price do you choose? These are sort of your high-level sources, but then when you actually go to the sort of numbers that companies use, it becomes even more varied. So there's two questions here. I mean, maybe sustainability accounting is useless because what is the social cost of carbon? People have all sorts of different ideas about the price. But the other idea is, and what I'm going to explain in a second, is actually that these sort of costs vary because context matters, and setting the right price or really the right value of an impact in your company really depends on your context. It depends on what you want to achieve and the questions you want to ask. Which is why I want to kind of illustrate this here with a simple example. So in this simple example, let's pretend that I am a business, and I'm a very simple business because all I do is I buy goods and services, I sell products and services, I hire some workers, I pay some salaries, and I emit CO2. That's everything I do. So first, let's deal with the CO2 from our last example. And the CO2, first the question I ask is, okay, what do I actually pay right now? And actually, there are regulations in some countries, the United States, Europe, even now China. The emission trading schemes are a way for the government wants to tax business or charge business on their CO2 emissions. And by doing so, what happens is this idea of internalization. And basically, it's by the internalization means you have an impact and you pay for it. And so it's no longer just an impact on society. Now actually that impact impacts the business that is polluting because it impacts the bottom line, or it's a cost, it's a direct cost to business. And it's the same idea for CO2 offsets, which are voluntary. It's a way for business to say, okay, this impact is important, I do recognize it, and I want to take care of it. So by paying the money, I make some money available for dealing with this impact. It's no longer just an impact on society, it's an impact on my business. So this is sort of the impact on your bottom line. However, CO2 may actually have a bigger impact than what you currently pay, for example, for an emission trading scheme, because the market price would only be the same as the social price. So the price on the entire society if the market was perfect, and markets are rarely perfect. So there's this idea of the social cost of carbon, which is really what is the entire impact on society. So there I'm asking a different question, actually, what is the value of my impact? And this is a very important question to ask when you start thinking about regulation risks and operational risks, because, for example, there is talks of a mandatory CO2 price out there. Governments are discussing this. So if I'm a company, my investors will probably be very interested to know if a CO2 price were to come in the immediate future, what would the impacts be on my bottom line? And that's where I use something like the social cost of carbon, or even a larger value for an internal carbon price, depending on my risk appetite, depending on how big I think this risk is. If I'm an oil company, probably I'll have a bigger carbon price than 36 euro per ton. And we actually see out there most big manufacturing companies, most resource-intensive, CO2-intensive companies, they have a carbon price that is way above the social cost of carbon, just because they understand that this is a big risk, and investors really want to see, okay, what's the worst-case scenario here? What would the impact on the bottom line really be? So it's about future risks, and it can also be about future costs. For example, food prices. How would food prices change if climate changes? So this is CO2, but then we also have this these dependencies on the environment, on the clean, healthy environment, and our products and services depend on the environment. I mean, pollination is a very big example. People estimate that the value of pollination worldwide is above 200 billion. And 200 billion is it's a very big number. It's something like 10% of the entire value of the agricultural market worldwide. And the value of pollination really is the value that agriculture derives from pollinators. So if pollinators did not exist, we would have less crops. It's as simple as that. So that's the idea of the ecosystem services. That's the idea of the business dependency on a clean environment. So there you have a different way of thinking about costs and benefits. And in terms of social stuff, as a skilled workforce, I mean, the business invests a lot in training employees, but some of these employees leave. So that's an investment in society in a way, because these trained employees are now available on the market to do a better job than they used to in the past. And finally, the goods and services that we sell, or that we buy rather, and the salaries that we pay, that's really the value that business brings. This is something that's immediately understandable to any businessman. People depend on the salaries from a business, and business pays taxes. It contributes to the country's economy. And as well, locally, business generates other business. It generates value for suppliers. And sometimes though it also takes value away. For example, if I'm not paying a decent wage, if I'm chronically underpaying my workers, this is a value lost to society. So yeah, the price depends on who's asking. It depends on the question that we're asking. But really, it's so it's not just playing with numbers, right? It's about thinking about the right questions that we want to ask, and then we can really figure out what the real value of our activities is. So an interlude though, because not everybody agrees with this idea of putting a price on the environment and society. This is just a few headlines that say, okay, but isn't nature priceless? Isn't no, are you trying to sell it? Are you trying to sell it away by putting a price on it? And actually, no. Business, yes, is priceless, but it's not valueless. And this is a very important distinction, because even though we're not trying to put a price tag on nature and society, so you can't just, you can't say, okay, it costs this much to pollute, so I'll just pay this amount of money and then fine, everything is good. Actually, no, but it's a way to show the real value in economic terms that otherwise you would ignore. If you're just focusing on the company financials, it's very easy to forget about the environment. Even if you're thinking about your CO2, maybe there's all sorts of other impacts apart from CO2. I mean, in an ideal world, business wants to focus on all of these. And as well, it doesn't mean that you can really substitute the impacts. And when I say this, there's this traditional saying. People say, okay, if you think the most important thing in the world is money, then try holding your breath while you're counting your money. And that's true, but it's only one part of the picture, right? Because also clean air doesn't buy you food. People need money in order to buy goods and services. Because if people didn't want to buy goods and services, business would not exist. So it's putting the price. It allows us to see trade-offs. It doesn't. It's not that you can substitute good for bad. You can see what the trade-off is. You can see, okay, can I make this better? Can I optimize this in some way? And in the end, we'll never know the full price of nature and the full price of society. But we can try to make at least some part, hopefully a significant part, visible, so we can help with decision making. It's all about making evidence-based decisions. And now a bit of an example to really kind of show you that we put a price on nature every day, even though we don't realize it. This is a map that we made in a research project that shows us Europe's natural treasures. And with natural treasures, what I mean is that, let's just give you an example. I'm going to grab my pen here. So here in the middle, you can see a beer. Okay, this is my beer. Okay, maybe I should make my pen darker so you can see it. This is my beer. So I have a beer. Okay, and so what do I need to make this beer? To make this beer, I need clean water, I need hops, and I need pollination, right? My pollinators, without them, I would never be able to have the crops that I need for my beer. And without nature to filter the water for me, I would have to pay huge amount of money to filter water on my own. So my beer would probably be too expensive for me to drink. And in the end of the day, what do we do with a nice beer? Maybe we want to go to a nice nature park. And there we can admire the physical beauty of nature. We may even pay a price to enter that park. We may even want to pay more to preserve it. We may be prepared to pay more to preserve it. And some parks, people say they are probably priceless because they're a cultural symbol, etc. So these are ways that we already start thinking about the environment in terms of its value. Only these values are usually hidden, so they're difficult to see. And our idea in sustainability accounting is to take this sort of thinking and just apply it to the environment, to society, to the products that we buy every day, to the services we buy every day, to the interactions we have with nature, so that we can try to manage them better. And so this is an example from a project that we did a while back. But really, to kind of stop with the theory and show you some project work and how it works in practice, I'm going to now switch over to my colleague Billy, who will tell you about a project that we did a few years back, trialing the natural capital
Yeah, thank you very much, Ivan. So in this session, we would like to give you a short overview about some practical examples. The first example is, as I mentioned already, we have been piloting and testing the Natural Capital Protocol. It was in the year back 2014 and 15. And actually, it's a practical example from the food and beverage industry. It was in collaboration with the Coca-Cola company. And what you see up there, it's about water replenishment projects. Replenish means, when you translate it, to refill or to fill something up again. And the water replenishment projects of the Coke company have one goal: to refill global water stocks for the community. And what the Coke company did throughout probably the last 15 to 20 years, they have identified, initiated water replenishment projects, and the assessment of the project was typically you invest a certain amount of money, and as a result you receive replenishment volumes, which means a certain amount of cubic meter of water which is regenerated. And we tested the Natural Capital Protocol because the assumption was that all those kind of water replenishment projects, they have additional benefits. Additional benefits means that whenever you're doing water replenishment projects, you have probably a positive impact to biodiversity, you have maybe an impact to carbon storage, you have maybe also an impact to recreation, so providing an area for recreation for people. And so therefore what you see on the right side, it has been the assessment of water replenishment projects. It's a 2x2 matrix, so therefore all in all we have assessed 8 different projects in this pilot project. And the 2 categories, on one side you have the ecosystem improvement, which means it's the percentage of ecosystem improvement between at the start of the project, so before the project implementation, and at the end of the replenishment project. So the big question was, was there at the end of the day ecosystem improvement? And the second category, it's called total investment multiplier. It gives you an indication, if you invest €1 of money, what's the societal benefit out of this €1 using the Natural Capital Protocol. And so therefore, with this assessment, the Coke company received additional information to make a better decision which of the projects in the future are more valuable and which creates additional benefit to the society. So this is an example where on a project level you can use sustainability accounting and to assess the absolute value of your project at the end of the day. Ida?
Thank you, Willie. Moving on though, from the project level, we can go even a step further to the level of operations. And here we have an example of a project that we carried out with a big food retailer, or rather a food wholesaler, and this is Metro. And Metro has this idea of a new business model that is basically like it's Amazon for restaurants. So they, rather than going to the store and buying all the products that they need, they have them delivered directly to their business. And what we really wanted to understand is what are actually the environmental and social implications of this, because Metro wanted to have some extra support for this business model and really understand the implications that they have on the environment and society by shifting their business in this way. And what we did is we went inside the business and we collected a lot of data on the typical delivery fleet of Metro, the food that they the typical food that they deliver, the food waste that they usually have, the efficiency of their cool chain, all these sort of things, as well as other interesting issues like the time it takes for a customer to enter the store, do their business, and go back home, compared to the time it would take if they order the goods and then have them delivered. And the idea of this really is, and this is really interesting because this is the biggest impact that we actually found, that save time was the biggest positive out of the new business model. And actually, it's not it's not that difficult to imagine, because if a business doesn't take up its time to go to the store, waste a few hours to buy the goods, and this happens maybe weekly or every 2 weeks, you can use that time for productive business activities. You can use that time to actually run and develop their business. And as well, we also found other important impacts, such as increased avoidance of food waste because of the cold chain assurance. So basically, if you have a refrigerated truck, it's better than putting all your goods in your car and maybe they start spoiling on the way. And then once they're in the restaurant, they're no longer fresh. They don't have the same value. So by using the company's internal data, and a lot of the data we sourced from the company sustainability report and everything else we could fill in with some national global statistics, we were able to assess the impact, the potential impact of this new business model for Metro's entire business in Germany. And why we're really proud of this project is that Metro, through this, became the global leader in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index in their sector, the sector of food and staples retailing. And our project was voted the leading practice example. So it was really, well, I would really want to think that this is the first time that this has been done in the food and the wholesale sector globally. And definitely it was quite an interesting project that has further led on to some other even more impactful work with this client. And then from an operations, we can even move on to the corporate level. And when I say the corporate level, I really do mean the entire impact of a business. What we have here is something called the integrated profit and loss statement that we developed from a client. So it's basically taking your profit and loss account and extending it with environmental and with social issues. The orange bars you see here are kind of the financial impacts. So it's all the stuff that you usually think about, the value to shareholders, the value to creditors, or the value to the bank, the salaries you pay, but also the taxes and the business that other companies generate with your business. And this happened to be for a very big gold and copper company in the European Union. And why this is such an interesting project is because mining companies are usually associated with big impacts, big negative environmental impacts, but also they are traditionally associated with wealth, with economic value. And it's no surprise. I mean, our client literally mines gold, so you can imagine that there is a big economic impact as well, and a big value added to the communities where they operate, because mining is a very resource and people-intensive business. So what we did is we combined everything in one picture that our client can now and they currently use to communicate locally with the communities in which they operate, and they also use this to communicate with politicians, with the media about their full range of impacts, not just in terms of the money that they bring, but also the impacts they have on the environment. It's a way for them to really see trade-offs, and now they're taking this one step further. And when they update it with new data, in the next year or the year after that, they can see, okay, how are my impacts changing? Am I improving? Am I not improving? And they can take all of their sustainability issues that they find important, put them in one picture, in one graph, and assess them all together so that they can see the trade-offs. And that's it from us in terms of examples. So now, really it's time for your questions. So I will open the floor.
Ivan, maybe one thing I would like to add, the two examples from the Coca-Cola company and from Metro, they are also publicly available because those companies published, I would call them white papers or position papers on those practical examples. So you can download also this kind of examples in terms of a white paper from the web page of those two organizations. And let's move to the questions now, and so that you can see that we are still here. Ivan, are you also still there?
Yes, I am, Willie.
Okay,
yes, here I am.
super. Perfect. So we are moving to the Q&A session, and I believe I have seen already some questions. Let me have a short look. Well, there's one question: what resources should the company allocate to such a project? what is the implementation period, and the people involved. Ivan, do you want to go for this?
Sure. Well, the cheap answer is that it depends on the project, but that's not really helpful. But really, it's again, I bring this back to, it's about the questions that you want to ask. For example, if you just want to know what the external value is of your CO2 emissions, of your air quality emissions, that's a project that you can do in a few days. For projects that we've done at the entire corporate level, that takes 3-4 months. So to collect all the data, it takes a while. Then it takes a while to build the model to really make sure you're covering the entire business. So I guess a similar amount of time to a sustainability report, but slightly less, I'm sure, because you already have most of the data that you need ready.
Okay, thank you. Then there's another question. What are the potential obstacles related to the implementation of such kind of project? Internal issues in the companies? Question mark. Ivan?
Yes, obstacles. Well, the biggest obstacles for any sort of data-driven project is the data. Occasionally, companies, they have they like this idea of sustainability accounting and making the invisible visible, because you have this idea. I know that this is important. Can we try to calculate? And we're usually really happy to try. But if you don't have the data that's needed, the activity data, you really can't come up with an answer that actually means anything in the context of your business. And I'll give a concrete example, and that's usually projects for donations. A lot of companies will invest in donations, but they won't track actually what happens after. You track the amount of money you give, but you don't track the impacts that you have. The people you reached, you don't know what happened after that. Did they actually learn anything from the event, etc.? So there, it becomes really difficult to make an assessment that's actually meaningful. Sure, we can try, but then the answer you get may not actually be the answer that's useful for you. That's usually the biggest obstacle. Occasionally, we have small things such as confidentiality of data, but that's usually that's solved with a confidentiality agreement. That's not difficult. Data is usually the big one.
Yeah, true. Then, Ivan, you get a tricky one. Hello, I would like to know if you can have more information, info about the mining project. That's a tricky one because we didn't disclose the name of the mining company.
Yes, that's confidentiality agreements apply, but of course we can talk in more general terms, and as well for specific context, because though contexts differ in local communities, mining is mining, so it's the same sort of impacts you find in most places. So we can talk about it only, I guess, one-to-one, I'd say.
Okay, Ivan, if you allow, I go for the easy one, because the question is, hi there, will the slides be available after the webinar? The answer is yes, we will send them out, and yes, we have also recorded this webinar, and the webinar will be provided to you. You can have later on a look on our webpage, and you will find the slides and the recorded webinar. Then there is one question: what models you use to calculate carbon footprint, e.g. greenhouse gas protocol? Is it openly accessible, or you have your own worked out solutions?
We always go for something that already exists. And when I say already exists, we go for something that's really already accepted in the sector. Greenhouse gas protocol, everybody's using it, so there's no point in us reinventing the wheel, right? Usually we base it on really widely accepted databases, widely accepted methodologies, and there's a good reason for that, because we want to give an answer that's credible, because otherwise people come after you, and then you come after us, and you say, okay, but what do my answers mean, and why did you do it in this way? We want to be safe, and we want to be conservative when making these assessments, right? It's about having an answer that's real, at least in the ballpark, not just playing with numbers.
And then I have a question from a person which I very well know. He is writing, there has been just been news about a gold mine in Turkey, that this company has already destroyed the whole valley and the water resources. How will this be measured, or the situation can be improved?
Well, this is a
That's
tricky
a
one.
complex one. That's a good one.
It depends on who's asking the question. And when I say this, so the company, they can maybe try and say, okay, but I'll generate this much economic value, so everything will be fine. But that's a cop-out. That's not a real answer. And actually, what the government, for example, can do, a regulator, they can take these impacts and they can say, actually, they cost this much to the environment and society, and they can go after them. And what other people can do, for example, this is what investors do, this is what banks do. In their due diligence, they will actually calculate the impacts that you have on the environment and society, and that's a reasonable proxy for how much maybe somebody was going to sue you in the future. So this company will probably find it very difficult to get a loan, and find it very difficult to find some worthwhile investors in the future. Of course, they can invest in trying to fix the situation. Then, this will show up in the accounts, but it always needs to be balanced, all the positive from the investment with the negative to the environment. And over time, maybe these will balance out. The point of the assessment is to really kind of show it, if you really want to show it in a real, transparent way, yes.
Then there's a question. Hold on, I need to find. What is the difference between financial and economic net present value?
Well, in practical terms, there's not much of a difference in the context that we're talking about. We talk about economic and not financial value because financial value is accounting, right? While economic value is, well, it's economics. It's sort of the impacts that you have on companies, on the global economy, on the regional economy. That's money that doesn't show up in your profit and loss, but it's real money that is generated somewhere else. So we don't really need to make a distinction in this context because we're always interested in the economic impacts, and by that I mean the impacts on society, right? Because economics studies what happens in society in countries at large, while finance and accounting studies what happens in my company.
Okay. Then next question, do you see any indicators that monetize sustainability which can become part of a general sustainability reporting in the future? So do you see, for example, when we talk about integrated and profit and loss accounting, do you see it as a part of sustainability reporting or sustainability indicator in the future? Is this a kind of trend according to you?
I know that it is because, for example, the Dow Jones Sustainability Index already includes an extra question. They call it a future question about valuation, whether you do it and what the value is. ESG investors, ESG companies, environmental and social governance companies, they're already starting to think about this, and they're starting to ask questions that are not mandatory, but they want to kind of understand, okay, is there a point in doing this? And more companies are actually doing it. In terms of what sort of indicators, the value of CO2, the value of the impacts, definitely. People are already doing that. Something like the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, TCFD, is all about the impact of climate change on the company's bottom line. So that is already integrated in there. Other things that I'm pretty sure we can see in the future is air quality. That's really important in places like Central and Eastern Europe, also in Asia and Africa, and it's very easy to calculate. It's like the greenhouse gas protocol, only with different numbers. People are talking about now in the natural capital sphere about something called the biodiversity protocol. So it's really about the impacts that a company has from clearing land or investing in land restoration. So there's some momentum behind that as well, only it's a bit less mature right now. So definitely CO2, it's already out there. People are doing it. People are reporting on it. I'm pretty sure biodiversity is going to be big because it's such a holistic topic, and now it's so there's some protocols that are kind of at the piloting level. So I'm pretty sure in Europe too we'll see those as well in the mainstream sphere.
Then the next question is this new approach, and I need to look also at the time. So we have another two questions, and I believe those two questions will go for them. Is this new approach not against maximizing the profit?
Well, it depends on how you think about it, right? Because sure, as a business, I want to make as much money as I can, but I don't work in a vacuum, right? I'm part of society, and there's people that are monitoring what I'm doing, right? It's the government is after me, the consumers are after me, the NGOs are after me. So you can't really ignore the environmental and social impacts. You don't ignore them even now. The only thing that doesn't really happen is you don't really kind of show them in an economic sense. And it's really important to understand that when we put a number on these, a financial number, this is not a number that goes into the profit and loss account. It's not a value that belongs to business. It's a value to society. So it's an indication of your impacts, but it's not something that people can come after you and put it in the profit and loss account and with a minus, and there goes all your profit. It doesn't work like that. The only thing that does work like that is something like a mandatory CO2 price, for example, or the emission trading schemes, because that is mandated by government for you to include there for your environmental impacts.
Mm-hmm. And then the last one, the question is, in global business, value of the same will be different, recalculated in euro. Is this a challenge? Also, the main challenge is how to measure impact on biodiversity and ecosystems.
Okay, so really two questions here, but number one, indeed, the value that you get in euro and the value that you get for the same activity in different countries is likely to be different. So here you need to be careful with the sort of prices that you use. And when I say prices, really, it's not a market price, it's a value. Here, people are usually conservative. For example, easy example, health costs in two countries. One is, let's say, the USA, the other one is in Africa. For the same amount of emissions and the same amount of life potentially lost, let's say, if you base things on, let's say, the local health costs, what you get as an answer is suddenly the African life is less valuable than the US life, purely because of the difference of the standard of living. But that's a tricky thing to say. So usually when we do these assessments, to be safe, we apply a sort of globally applicable value of health costs, a value of life, if you will. And this is something like the economic value that a person would generate in 1 year of healthy life. So it's the same way as the CO2 price, the global CO2 price, or the social cost of carbon, rather. It's the same everywhere, because you don't want to be dealing with these issues of equity. You don't want to say, my life is more valuable than your life purely because I live in a more affluent country. That's wrong. And at the end of the day, it's about the impact on society. And society and people, if we want to be ethical about it, should be equally important everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. We need to close right now, because what I've learned the last, probably I would say the last 20 years in my career, you need to stop a discussion on time, because otherwise people are leaving the session and you cannot say goodbye. So therefore, on behalf of Denkstatt, thank you very much for participation. Thank you very much also for a lot of questions. There's quite a long list of questions which we haven't answered until now. There's also a lot of thank you to Ivan and to Willy for the clear presentations. Also from our side, thank you very much for the participation. We will provide the slide deck, but also the recorded webinar on our webpage. You will be informed via email on this one. If you have additional questions, feel free to get in contact with us. Feel free to drop us an email. We are happy to help. We are happy to answer. Thank you very much once again on behalf of Denkstatt, and have a great evening. Thank you.